Okay, perfect. All right, well, hello everyone. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Julie Easley, who is a research director in the Department of Medical Education at Horizon Health Network. And she's also a researcher with Dalhousie's Department of Family Medicine. I know that she has a bit of introduction prepared as well, so I'll let her take the lead. So welcome, Dr. Easley.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. And I thought I would maybe before we get going, if maybe everyone could just give me a little context of a brief introduction of who's on here today and what your bit of your background is, and just so I can kind of help tailor some of the things when we have our discussion about this, if that's okay.
Yeah, I suppose I could start. So my name is Benny. I'm a second year PhD student in Dr. Keith's Brunt's lab. My background is in chemistry. So I did a bachelor's in chemistry at McGill University, did a master's in pharmacology here at Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick, and then now I'm in my second year of my PhD. And I guess my career aspirations is towards maybe industry. So anything industry related, either in the lab or non-lab work, is kind of the avenue I want to take in the future.
That's great. Thank you.
Do you want me to jump in?
Oh,
there's Tori.
Sorry. I'm just leaving the lab. I'm on my phone, but I'm Tori Olson. I'm a PhD candidate also with Dr. Keith Brent. I just finished my second year of my PhD, and I did my master's here as well, so I've been at DMNB for a while. But my hope is to stay in academia, ideally when I finish.
That's great. Thanks. Anyone else?
I can go.
Okay.
I mean, most of you here know who I am. I'm the clinical research manager at the New Brunswick Heart Center and director of experiential learning at Impart. And I'm also a PhD student at Dell. So it's lots of hats that I wear. Very happy to be here today, and I hope people trickle in as time goes on. And then I think I'm going to pass it to Manali's not her microphone is not working. Maybe Alicia?
Yeah, happy to jump in. So I'm Alicia. I'm one of the clinical research volunteers with the New Brunswick Heart Center. My background, I did my undergrad in neuroscience at Carleton University, and then last year graduated with my master's in public health from Memorial. And I'm currently working with Trauma New Brunswick, but I'm very interested in pursuing medicine. So very excited to hear what you guys have to say today. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Is that everyone, or
we've got two more? We've got Mark.
2 more.
Yeah, Mark. Do you want to? Can you hear us? Or Sanya? I guess either. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right.
Hi, my name is Sanya. I'm a fourth year biomedical student at UNB. So I'm in biomedical sciences. So I'm looking forward for medicine as well.
Great. Thank you.
So we have just one more, I guess, Mark, but I don't know if he's. No, Gurpreet, you didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, well, hello everyone. Well, my name is Gurpreet, and I am working at the Heart Center as a clinical research assistant part-time. And I just graduated from my master's as well from Dalhousie Medicine, New Brunswick in St. John. I did my master's in biochemistry and molecular biology. So I would like to stay in academic research as well. So looking forward to this workshop. Thank you.
That's great. If that's, I can move forward if that's it. I have some slides to share. I just wanted to kind of get some context of who everyone was here. And again, I want to make a disclaimer that I'm not an HR person. So my advice is just based on purely on my experience. And so I'll share a bit of my backstory here. I'm going to share my slides first. Okay, sorry, stand by here while I. Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes.
Yes, we
okay.
can.
Okay. Great. So this I kind of want, it's going to be a bit of a twofold because I want to try to make it a little more interactive than just me reading off the slides here. But I'll start off with a bit of my background. So I'm in the medical education department with Horizon, but how I got here is kind of an interesting trajectory of kind of mix of personal experience and my, sorry, I just have to adjust my, oh, that's no problem. Sorry, I'm just gonna adjust my thing here so I can see my slides. Okay, can you still see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so my background is in anthropology. And you know, what am I doing in the medical education department? I actually started out in archaeology and graduated from Dal with my undergrad. And I'm not going to lie, I was a mediocre student. I did some, you know, I had some interest in, I did a minor in botany. I was going to be an ethnobotanist or an archaeologist. I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life when I graduated with my undergrad. And when I graduated, I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer at 23, and it changed a whole lot for me. And this is it's relevant because it's kind of how I ended up changing my trajectory and moving in a different career path. And what that taught me was, okay, how do I bring this background that I don't really have much relevant experience, and I want a career in an area that I didn't do any studies in. And so from that, I was able to kind of craft my way and creatively reposition and rewrite my CV many, many times to either get into grad school. So I did end up getting into UNB doing my master's in medical anthropology. And then from that, I managed to get a job as a research assistant, worked on various projects throughout my master's, and then ended up working at the hospital as a research assistant and ended up where I am now. So it was kind of this like long trajectory, but in the meantime, I ended up doing contracts, working for industry, doing as a consultant on certain projects, doing some grunt work there. I worked for government. I also managed some large national teams, research teams. I worked for U of T, UBC, University of Saskatchewan as a research assistant, mostly, I think there was a few more there. University of Ottawa, I did a contract with them. So I've had a lot of experience of kind of maneuvering around as a research assistant and eventually finding a career path that worked for me. And some of that was using my personal experience and using that as a tool. So one of the things that I wanted to do before we get started was I thought that we could just do a little personal reflection. So if everyone has like, either keep it in your brain, you don't have to share, just for yourself, is when we go through this, I want you to keep in mind, and again, everyone has such diverse backgrounds and rich backgrounds that if we could just do a little personal reflection here. Sorry, it's working here. So just a little exercise, and this is going to be relevant when you start thinking about how to self-promote. You know, it's self-marketing 101. And the first thing I want you to think about is, what is your dream job? So what are your aspirations? And, you know, a lot of you have mentioned it when you're talking to say, you know, you're hoping to work in industry, you want to work in a lab, or if you want to work more on the academic side of things, you know, what does your dream job look like? Because that's really important, even if you're applying for jobs that may or may not be your, you know, final destination. There's a lot of steps you can take along the way that help you to build your CV, to get those skills, to get that experience that will get you to that step of being, you know, maybe your dream job or close to it, or a job you didn't dream of, but yet you really, really love. You know, all things can happen along the way. As why I share my personal experiences, because again, I thought I was going to be working in the Amazon somewhere, discovering medicines, or, you know, uncovering ruins of a lost empire. So, and then I ended up where I am today. So anything can happen along that road. So I want you to think about, what does your dream job look like? You know, is it coordinating? Is it, you know, doing lab work? Is it, you know, working government, industry? The second thing is, I want you to think personally. Now, what is your superpower? You know, for me, I grew up in rural New Brunswick. I'll give you an example. I feel like my personal superpower is that I can speak rural New Brunswick, and it has served me well. But I also grew up with, my mother was a teacher, and my grandmother and generations beyond were a teacher. So I feel like one of my superpowers is that I can talk to local rural people, at a level that they may understand. And I feel like that's, but I also have feel capable of talking to those in higher up positions. And I think that's one of my superpowers. So I want you to think about, like, what's your superpower? What part of your background? You know, are you a great communicator? Are you really good at diplomacy? Are you good at negotiating? You know, analyzing. Maybe you're really good at attention to detail, but maybe there's something in your personal life that actually is your superpower. And where this becomes relevant is, you know, maybe that's a skill that you aren't necessarily even aware of because it's just innately part of you. But it can be a skill that you can use as a strength and use that in your CV or use it in your job interview. So for me as a researcher, I'm a qualitative researcher predominantly. And I feel like that superpower has allowed me to get really some really great research data. So I want you to think about, what's your personal superpower? And then what do you bring to the table professionally? What part of your background? Everyone just shared some really interesting backgrounds. So what helps, you know, what is it that you bring? Are you really good with, you know, data and data analyzing? Oh my gosh. Data analysis. Are you really good at, you know, maybe it's a certain program that you're good? Like, what are your actual skill set that you feel you bring to the table? And then, what steps do I need to take the work towards my dream job? And again, this will be relevant to your CV, because when you're crafting a CV, all of these things become relevant. And even when you're looking for jobs, I found this was the most useful thing, is that even if you may not have the skills right now for your dream job, whatever that may be, or the level that you want, there are steps you can take that can help build your skill set. So, you know, maybe it's not, you know, maybe it's working, you know, some other job that's fine detail oriented, and that builds a skill that then someone at a lab may find that as a really great skill set. Like, it's being able to transfer skills that you acquire into usable skills in the industry or the, you know, academics or wherever you want to go. So, so if you just take a few minutes as we're talking today, tonight, just jot down those things or even think about it afterwards. And that will help, you know, hopefully frame your CV. So the next thing I want to show is that here are just a few CV basics. Now, I don't want to focus too much tonight on, templates and what a CV should look like. First of all, the most basic thing to keep in mind is that there's a difference between a resume and a CV, a curriculum vitae. And, for a resume, there's going to be jobs that you apply for that you need a resume. And that is a short, targeted summary that's really taking your skill set and applying it very specifically to that job. So it's typically shorter versus a CV, which is a comprehensive record. So you're really showcasing you in general versus what selected skills do you have for that job in a resume. So there's times that you're going to be using both, and there is an art to condensing to a resume and being selective. But I'm going to focus mostly on the CV part. A lot of jobs in industry and government and, in academics would be more of a CV format versus, say, if you're applying for, a job at the movie theater or something like that, you might just need a targeted smaller. So I'm going to talk about the CV. And the other tip is that you're not going to end up with just a CV. You're going to have CVs. And so what I mean by that is I just looked in my file to look at my CVs, the last ones that I've used for various things, and I had 30 saved. So I have, my academic CV, I have my brief academic CV, I have, the BioSketch CIHR CV, I have, all these different types of CVs. And with that, the third tip is that saving one master copy, I cannot, tell you how important that is. And others can probably attest to that already. You may not think it now, but it becomes really hard to keep track of what you've done. Especially, there's, you may have been on CBC one day. Well, you want to save these things, and whether they're relevant to every job, you just park it. It's your parking lot CV where you park your information, keeping track of publications and presentations, which, when you're a student seems like, oh, of course you're going to keep track of them. But, as you progress in your career and you work on big teams and there's, students doing work for you, hopefully, or, other people working together, it's really hard to keep track of all these little things. And when did I teach what class, or was I a TA somewhere? So it's important to keep one copy just as a parking place for all that you've done. The biggest tip I can possibly convey to you, and I asked a bunch of people, again, to get some input for making this workshop, is that pay a careful attention to formatting and editing. The number one thing everyone said that is a turnoff when they are looking to hire someone is looking down and seeing a typo or poor formatting. And by formatting, there's templates out there. There's lots of, examples out there. I can't stress enough how important it is to look at examples and see how consistency is very, very important. But I receive in my work, I receive a lot of CVs from research assistants and medical students, and over the years on different projects I've worked on, I've gone through a lot of CVs, and I cannot tell you how many have typos or grammar mistakes or formatting. And we're in this day and age where there's so much help out there. There's so many templates. There's lots of things that you can do to help with that. So everyone I asked about what their number one tip was for CV writing, and everyone said no typos, number one, with as many exclamation marks as you can possibly imagine. So it's a big issue, and you wouldn't think it would be, but it's very, very common. The other thing, which I'm going to touch on again, is that, we're in this age of AI. AI is a tool, but in this context, there's lots of ways to use, ChatGPT and stuff to help you. But I would caution to use it with limitations. And what I mean by that, I'll get into it later, is that there's lots of contexts where you can help with wording, with stuff, even formatting, templates. But one of the biggest deterrent I also heard from everyone when I asked what do they look for when they're looking for a lab assistant or teaching assistant or even government position, is that we're in this day and age now where you can tell something's written by ChatGPT. And so when people are writing cover letters, that's a time when you really want to see someone's original words. Not to say ChatGPT can't help you with that, but we're starting to see very canned answers, these words that people wouldn't normally use. And so what the new wave, it's kind of went from this extreme of, wow, these cover letters look amazing, but then suddenly recognizing that they weren't written by the people. There's a quest for authenticity. So when I say use AI as a tool, an underlining tool, it's just that. It's a tip for, maybe helping with wording, but try to use your own words as well, especially in a cover letter. You want to come off as authentic and you're selling yourself. And these are skills that you are very beneficial to be able to write and, edit and present. So, and the last one is kind of basic CV stuff. Use active specific verbs when describing things. So you want to sound very positive and forward momentum and, confident. So using analyze, facilitated workshops, collaborated with, so many teams or team members. So again, I don't want to focus too much on the CV basics. I know there were some questions about tailoring your CV. So again, this is just an example. These are not, these aren't set in stone. This was just me brainstorming ideas, but I wanted to kind of just touch on this briefly, is that tailoring your CV. So when I mentioned earlier that there's really having CVs, not just a CV, you're going to learn this quickly, is how to spin it for different contexts. So I just was brainstorming, and again, everyone else may have different ideas, but these are just kind of an example of how headings may differ depending on your CV and which context you're applying for. So where a research or an academic CV may look for research summary or research experience, professional skills, professional development and volunteer activities, publications, presentations, among others. There's tons of other ones you could put in. Instead of a research summary, maybe in the industry CV, you would call it a professional summary, or for government one, it would be summary of qualifications. So even just spinning how you're selling yourself and how you're presenting yourself and your skills and what your whole CV looks like is going to differ depending on which context. So instead of research experience, it could be professional experience or employment history. Professional skills could be technical skills if it's, very industry related to a technical skill base that they're looking for, or competencies in government. Professional development volunteer activities may look like it's leadership and community involvement or committees and professional membership. So really, really thinking about the context and what would be relevant to that sector is really, really important. And it comes right down to even being important in the headings that you use when you're presenting your information and your background. Presentations. Well, maybe speaking engagements are important for industry, or presentations and outreach. So just really kind of keeping that in mind. And here another example is, so say if you're targeting a role that's academic, the emphasis when you think about academics, what is it that you're doing when you're a researcher? You want to emphasize publications, grant writing, teaching, training, and even the professional development. So conferences attended, training, fellowships if you've taken it on, or special skill sets related to research or teaching. Describing the projects. Sometimes I don't know if there'll be time, but I was going to show you a sample of one of my old CVs where I worked for 13 years as a research assistant, and I thought that doesn't look very exciting. It doesn't really sell what I've been doing. So I decided to list off the different projects that I worked on because I was applying for a position in a primary care coordination context. I wanted to show, hey, I've worked on a whole bunch of primary care research studies and managed them. So I ended up, even though it was one employment history, so to speak, I wanted to showcase what different skill sets and methods and outcomes that I had done within that role. And so within that, emphasizing your roles, as a research assistant, a data analyst, or a co-author or principal investigator, those are kind of just a few examples of things that might be important in an academic CV. If you're looking for clinical research, and again, everyone here may have something to add to this. This is just kind of just a sample of an example of some things to think about is, in a clinical research or a hospital setting, maybe it's more applied research. It's looking at collaboration. You do a lot of teamwork, interdisciplinary work, patient outcomes or patient-centered care. These are all, and also like deliverables. So the outcomes may look different for if you're highlighting your CV work for a clinical role. And hospital-based, like quality improvement projects and skills, it's very much relevant. I find I kind of bridge, and a lot of you, I see that you're within Horizon as well, is that we kind of bridge with the health research. There's that academic when you're a student, but also working in a hospital setting. And I see that a lot with medical education, where it's clinical research, but we're kind of an academic, it's Dalhousie University, but in the hospital setting. So we have this really unique situation of being very involved in clinical research, but also academic work. So sometimes it bridges both, but I can tell you that quality improvement skills are big time in demand, which are, at some level, research skills that we've learned along the way in our graduate work and stuff. So it's easy to kind of transfer some of those skills. And I recommend, if you are interested in any kind of hospital-based research or job prospects, that going to do some extra training in quality improvement, it really sells itself well. If you're targeting government or even community-based organization, the policy relevance. Government's always looking for money to save money and ways to spend money. Policy, program evaluation. These, from my experience, have been always the biggest highlight, especially for government. You want to see how your research experience has influenced practice or policy. So having kind of evidence-based outcomes or, quantifiable measures or achievements, which I'll get into later. Though that seems to lend itself very well when you're trying to tailor your CV for government. So you always keep in mind, what are their overarching mandate? Community-based organizations are often looking for funding or looking for community support or trying to promote something. So maybe it's highlighting your KT experience, knowledge translation experience or presentations or publications in that context. Industry, pharma, biotech. I don't have a lot of experience. I've done a few contracts in this world, but it was more from a social science lens. So I can't speak directly to a lot of these things, but from the people I talk to, really technical expertise, problem solving, results oriented, focus on deliverables, collaboration, innovation, and adaptability are the things that the people I asked really highlighted that were really important and what they look for in a CV. And I cannot stress by enough to say, do your research. I cannot tell you how many research assistants or admins that have applied at our work currently, where I work now, who know nothing about medical education. They don't know anything about Dalhousie. I work in the family medicine residency program. They don't know anything about the job or the work, or they think if someone's approaching me about working with me as a research assistant on my projects, but thinks I do bench science lab work and didn't do their research to read any of my articles, or I think, to me, it really shows a lack of, motivation or whatever the skills to kind of go out there above and beyond to really, really show that you are interested in the job. So I can't stress that enough, how important it is to do a little background. And then you can tailor your CV. Go to LinkedIn, find someone that has worked there to see what skill set they have. Find similar jobs. Look to see what's on there. Look on YouTube, look on social media. Just do any kind of research on that type of job. And even if you know someone that works in that industry, ask your mentors, your supervisors. Just put feelers out. And this helps with the whole thing of networking, which is a huge part of getting a job. It isn't just because of who you know, but it's also making that connection to find out more information about different organizations and how they work together and being a link between them. So I can't stress that enough of how important that is to reach out and, play the field and stretch beyond your networks to learn more about different industries and how you may fit in with one or more or collaborate with them. So I guess I didn't put my arrows in there. Hang tight. So this is another thing, and this is kind of what I've touched on already, is the art of wordsmithing. And what I mean by wordsmithing is, as I used in the example early on, the importance of, you're going to have to change your CV and adapt it to whatever the job that you're looking for or applying for or the opportunity. And a lot of that is just changing the language you're using. So a really important part is making that connection between your experience and the job opportunity. So you may not necessarily have exactly, a job in that area, but say you worked again in the, retail, worked at a cashier. So you have experience, managing employees if you were the manager, or like there's skill sets that you can get from jobs that aren't related. And too often I've been in job interviews with people and they weren't able to connect their past experience with the current opportunity. And if you can't link it, then the interviewers and the people reading your CV are most certainly not going to be able to link the two. So it's up to you to find a way to make your experience match or be very I can't even think of the word just connect the two, and so that they're makes sense why you're applying to the job even if you don't have the exact skills. And again, just adapting your CV to the job requirements and description. And that's where that research comes in. Use keywords that they're using in the job description. Find ways to wordsmith that, change it. And I'll have an example here. So I just thought I'd give a little example of, say if you wanted to turn your academic CV into a CV for industry position. One thing you could start with is that wordsmithing of replacing academic jargon with transferable skills language, something that's more relevant to industry as we look at that technical skills. So for example, instead of talking about being a principal investigator on a project, you just change the language a bit to say a project lead. That just fits more with the language used within industry positions of some technical skill set. Manuscript preparation, for example, could become, technical writing and documentation, data analysis and SPSS. Well, that's statistical modeling and decision support analysis. You try to, it's not that you're lying, you're saying the same thing, but you're saying it in a way that matches the, the industry or the organization or whatever it may be that you're applying for. So that's what I mean by wordsmithing. Sometimes it's just that, you have to get creative sometimes. And that's an example of where AI can be of great use, or ChatGPT. Type in, say, hey, I have this skill set. How can I make it sound more like industry related? That's a great example. Use AI as a tool, or, even ask friends, or, if you don't want to go to the AI route, there's lots of ways that you can kind of brainstorm ways to kind of shift the language. And so, for example, in industry positions, you might want to include outcome-oriented statements and kind of quantify those achievements, like I mentioned before. So, secured 25,000 in grant funding, or supervised 3 undergraduate research assistants. So instead of just saying, I have supervision experience, what specifically? So in cases like that, you can, really make it quantifiable. So how do you capture the attention of hiring teams? Again, this is just based on kind of my own experience of hiring and the people that I talk to. I probably talked to about a dozen friends and coworkers and colleagues before this workshop, just to kind of get a sense of the different areas and what they look for. And everyone said the same thing. These days, jobs are getting on average 200 to 300 applicants just for even the most basic admin job. And probably maybe 90% of them aren't even looked at, because they don't even, like, a lot of people are just firing out CVs that aren't even related to the job at all. So there's piles and piles and piles that they have to sort through. And so the very first step that a lot of hiring teams will do is they skim the top third of a CV, and they look at, depending, I don't know if industry focuses as much on a cover letter, but I know in my area of work and from my experience, the cover letter is really what sells it for us. If you can clearly write a cover letter, and you can connect your background with, what the job is, and tell me how this is relevant and why you want this job, that's what I look at right off the top. And a lot of other people said, it's just that top third of the CV. If your CV doesn't look nice, it's not easy to scan or easy to read. There's a chance that it might not make it past, the pile to make the cut to even get into the short list. So formatting really does matter. And if you think about, doing some kind of summary statement at the top, 2 to 3 lines about your research focus, maybe your strengths and goals, your superpower that you came up with, just kind of really highlight. So you make it easy for someone looking at CVs to go through them and say, oh, well, this person's, got a lot of interest and stuff. And then they're going to want to go into more depth in your CV. And so again, I mentioned this already, but using keywords from the job posting in your research on the company. So whatever you find on the company, and you find, for example, applying to a Horizon position, just go online. So much is online in the organization. Look on Horizon. They have their strategic plan public. They have their annual reports. There's their mandate. What is their, their overarching goal? What do they stand for? What are their value statements? All of those things will give you a good sense of what an organization prioritizes and really values. So using that kind of language in your CV and in your cover letter is really important. And again, keeping it clear and consistent. So making it scannable and easy to read. And it sounds kind of terrible when you say, like, oh, geez, they're not even giving it the 2 cents worth. But really, when they have a stack of 300 to 400 applications to go through, they have to make some way to make it manageable to get to the ones that they want to look further. So you want to make your CV the one that they want to go further. And so, a way to do this also is highlighting impact, not just the duties. So, if you say you published or presented a report, to an organization, well, maybe that publication helped change some kind of policy, or it impacted, or, maybe, there's other ways to kind of highlight the impact of what happened after something. So if you do happen to have any examples of that it's a nice thing to highlight within it. And again, I cannot stress, particularly in my area, and again, maybe not so much in other areas, and but particularly I know my experience applying for government jobs and also academic jobs, and from people that I've hired, it's almost always the cover letter, because if you want to show that you are good with details, you pay attention to detail, that you have editing skills, that you are good with knowledge translation, everything, your cover letter is what's going to highlight that. And that's when I go back to that authenticity and the importance of, making a really impactful cover letter. You got to sell them. And if you can't connect past experience with what you're going for now, then the person's not going to be able to do it for you. So I kind of have a cover letter for me of the million cover letters that I've written over the years for myself. And again, I asked other people and they kind of agreed with me. So if you kind of look at the cover letter, you usually start out with just an introductory paragraph. So what in that you put what position you're applying for, where did you find it, and a general statement why you feel you're the perfect person for this job. Second paragraph, this is the bulk of the cover letter. This is what makes you connect that training, background, experience, and your skills with the job opportunity. So what do you bring to the table and how does it match what they're looking for? And then third paragraph, which can be combined with the final paragraph sometimes, depending, I do it either way, but this is why you want the job. So why is this job perfect for you? So last paragraph is why you're perfect for this job. Third one, or the final one, is kind of this, what's your motivation? Why do you want this job? And then the final paragraph is just kind of you briefly conclude why you are the best candidate for this job. You give a thank you, and then you very enthusiastically say, I look forward to hearing from you soon, or I look forward to meeting with you or having an interview to discuss my qualifications further. Some kind of closing thing. And I've written this for industry positions. I've written this for government positions. My partner's in an industry-based thing. I've helped him with his cover letter many times. This is a formula that I can attest to has been very successful. And so, if you simplify it for that, once you're perfected, and then you can just tailor it to each job you're applying for. So sometimes I include a personal bit about my experience as a cancer survivor. I worked at the New Brunswick Cancer Network, and I was the implementation manager for developing a cancer patient navigation program for the province. I thought that was very relevant that I disclosed that I had an experience navigating the system for many, many years, having had it so young. I felt that relevant. And so I included just a very brief touch to say that my motivation was both personal and professional, and that with this experience that I have an insight into this area from multiple lenses. So sometimes you can find ways to include a bit of personal. I wouldn't go too much overboard, but there's times when that becomes very relevant. So again, back to our self-reflection. I want to leave time for some discussion and some any questions and stuff like that. So I won't go into showing the examples, but go back at some point, whether it's right now or as you're crafting your CV, go back to those questions at the beginning and really think about what is it you want to do? What do you think you bring to that table, either personally or professionally? And then what steps do I need to take to get to that place I want to be? So what jobs might help build that CV, or what training, what extra training? Maybe it's, getting a certificate of teaching, graduate teaching certificate, or through the university, or maybe it's this quality improvement thing, or maybe it's, a lab-based skill set or extra thing that, hopefully doesn't cost anything, but even investing in yourself is always a worthy to get to that dream job level. And again, I was going to show some examples. I was going to show them on the slides, but it's actually really hard to, I could only really share my own CV. So, but I'll spare you on that right now, just so we have some time for discussion. And I just wanted to one last thing is to say, There's resources out there. Like there are so many online CV templates, there's guides, there's tutorial on YouTube, there's whole workshops, probably more in depth and useful than this one. But there's tons of resources out there online. Also ask friends, family members, mentors, your colleagues for feedback. Share your CV. Just get someone to review it from different industries or different realms and see what their feedback is, and look for advice. I learned so much, even if I ever had to apply for another job, which I hope I don't, but if I ever did, I learned so much just even from asking my colleagues, what do you look for in a CV? It led to really great conversations, so I highly recommend that. At the universities and colleges and institutions, usually there's employment services of some sort, and they have someone often who will sit down with you and go through writing a CV and give you feedback and have resources on hand. So as students, feel free to reach out to your university and ask them. Even within Horizon, reaching out to the HR department to say, is there anyone that could just give me some feedback on my CV or help me with it? They're typically happy to help because it's to their advantage, especially as they're trying to recruit. They want to be as supportive as possible and get the people that they want. So another point, just once again, using AI as a tool, I highly recommend it, but to a certain extent, there still needs to be that authenticity and your genuine voice. If you truly want to show your skills, it's becoming very, very, very obvious in academics. And, there's even trackers now that can pick up when something's written by AI, but it doesn't mean it can't be used as a tool, help you with finding words, that wordsmithing, formatting. You can even upload your CV into ChatGPT. I don't know if it's on the free ChatGPT, but you can upload it and say, give me some feedback on this. How can I strengthen this? And it will kind of give back some tips. Use it as you may, but it is a useful tool for certain contexts. And again, feel free to reach out to me anytime for assistance or feedback. If you want to send me your CV, I'm happy to look it over and give some advice, or I don't even mind, if you want to do a one-on-one Teams meeting with anyone, I'm happy to go through it and just kind of give my 2 cents worth. And again, not an HR professional, but I have looked at a lot of CVs and I have sent out a lot of CVs in my lifetime. So I'm always happy to connect with anyone if you want some advice or tips. And that's it for my presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments or feedback? Yeah, Tina.
I do have a question actually. So, being on both ends where I've definitely applied for jobs and I've hired folks as well, one of the questions that I struggle with is how much is too much when your job experience is relevant, but you don't want to give, I don't know, 30 pages worth of, your experience. Yeah.
How I have dealt with that, geez, I struggle that with a lot because sometimes like it sounds really like you're bragging or something, but after a while when you get a lot of publications, your CV becomes really obnoxiously long. What I do is I try to filter. I use the word selected publications or relevant experience. So I've cut out a lot of the experience. I have a lot of work experience that's, it's stuff I did, but it's not relevant. So using in your headings the words relevant research experience, or just focusing on your research experience, or things, because what you're trying to do is, you always remember, is you're trying to sell yourself to get an interview, which is when you can talk about the depth of your experience and stuff like that. So highlight depending on the job. I don't know if I could actually say there is a limit. It really would depend on the job, but a 30-page CV definitely is going to be too long. But cutting it down to, like, do they need to know all your conference presentations? Maybe not, but maybe your publications are relevant. Maybe the last 5 years of publications is relevant. So you really have to just kind of pick and choose. Okay, do I want to highlight what's most recent? Do I want to highlight what's most relevant? Or do I just pick a selection that's based? So for example, I applied for a position. I can't even remember. I can't even remember what the job itself was, but it was something in, I worked in the Department of Population Health in Horizon, and it was a research coordinator for their community health needs assessment. So what I wanted to do was to highlight my community engagement, my involvement in rural, New Brunswick activities in my cover letter. So I included some of my volunteer experience and ways that I have been connected to various groups within a lot of communities within New Brunswick, because this was specifically a community health needs assessment position. I had another job that I had was in the primary healthcare sector. And so I wanted to highlight my projects that I worked on that were relevant to primary care, my publications that were primary care focused. For example, my CV that was for cancer, the Cancer Network. I really wanted to highlight, my cancer research experience, specifically. I also did a lot of media coverage. I was the poster child for cancer survivors for a while there. And with the Cancer Society, I highlighted that because it was relevant. I was a board member. So, yeah, that's how I deal with it, is I just kind of, depending on the thing, just try not to be too crazy, but still include enough details, and really just enough to sell it so that you can get an interview, because ultimately that's what you're trying to get in. You want your foot in the door, because then you can tell them about what you've done, and you can, your live action, you can then connect it in person. So the CV is the gateway.
Right. Thank you. That's a great answer, actually.
Yeah. Omar?
Can't hear you.
Can't hear
Oh,
you.
you're muted.
We'll jump to someone else maybe until.
Let's say there.
I think
We have one in the chat.
I think it's by Malik. She's asking, my concern is if I went through an unemployment gap period, how can I explain that within my CV, and should I mention that in the cover letter?
Oh, that's a great question. I have despite having a lot of various jobs, I also had a big gap in my CV. And I also had a big gap in publications for when I did work in government, and then I wasn't doing research stuff anymore. And then I had to go apply for a research job, and I had this huge gap. Like, I didn't have any grants, I didn't have any publications or conference presentations. I think what I have done is just present it as is in my CV, and highlight, I guess it depends on the job that you're applying for. If it's something that you think that it would be a deterrent somehow, because again, sometimes they might not notice because they're looking at, what you bring to the table. So if there is a gap, but you had past relevant experience and, you've been working towards something, it may not be as relevant as saying, like, if I looked at a CV, I would actually, what would probably alert me more would be when I see on a CV someone that's jumped around to a whole bunch of different jobs in short-term stints. That to me is more of a red flag than someone that might have a gap. And not to say that we don't. I mean, I've done contract work up until 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I was completely doing contracts. So, grant-based research. So sometimes it does look like you're jumping around. But yeah, I would say, if it seems like something you want to disclose, if it's a personal reason and you don't want to disclose, then you don't have to. If they ask about it in the interview, then maybe that's the time when you can discuss it. But I would wait to see if they ask about it, to be honest, unless it's something that, is relevant. to the job itself.
I just want to add on to that. Sorry,
Yeah.
feel free to interrupt you. Do you think it's a deterrent, like some employers won't select somebody because they had an employment gap, or is that a far stretch?
I think it depends on the job and depends on the industry. If it's something that requires technical skills that you need to be up and front and center on the most recent of things, then it might be worthwhile to, go back and kind of refresh some of your training or something to address that gap.
Okay.
But in my work, a gap it's not a deal breaker. A lot of people have, they leave on paternity or maternity leave,
right.
Parental leave.
Right.
They have different jobs. They take a job in a different sector. They just didn't work because they had to stay home with the kids. There's lots of reasons. Not a deterrent at all in my world, but maybe something that requires a technical skill. It might be. And in that case, you would have to think of an answer of why you would still be the best candidate for this job. So It's that wordsmithing. So just have an answer ready when they do ask, and if not, maybe refreshing some of those skills. So it just depends on the industry.
Thank you.
Maybe Omar, yeah, go ahead.
Is it working now? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry about that earlier.
That's okay.
My question is about like university and high school, like curriculum stuff. Would you include that on your resume, or like what you did during that like course load, or not really?
Yeah, it depends. If you have space, again, the reason why I just shared kind of my personal journey of where I started out and where I ended up is because when I honestly, I did okay in my undergrad, but I wasn't like a stellar student. So a lot of what I had to do is sell them on why I was a good person and why I had some kind of skill set. So I put on everything, and it'll take too long for me to get my CV up and everything like that to show you, but I have it under a heading called professional development and volunteer activities. Just lump it all together. And honestly, I lumped everything. I lumped, media things. I was a journal review. I've done a lot of journal reviews. I put that on there. I was on a video for something. I'm sure it was cancer related. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I just lumped everything that I had on there. I was the coach of a volleyball team. I'm just going to pop, because what that shows is like I managed a group. I was able to I'm giving back to my community. So some of these volunteer activities, even if you may not realize it, it tells me a lot about the person. And sometimes when I'm hiring, I want to see, does this person look like they'd be fun? Does this person look like they'd be engaging? Does this person look like they could lead a group? Does this person, have what it takes to, stick through something, for a time? This person also isn't driven by money if it's a volunteer experience. That's huge, especially in our industry where, you don't want someone that's just out there to make money. You want someone that wants a meaningful career. And sometimes those volunteer experiences can really highlight that. So I say yes, if there's room. If there's not room, you can be selective. You can find a way to add it in your cover letter. I added it, as I said, my volunteer experience with communities. I added that in my cover letter when I was applying to work with the population health team. Just because I had worked with food banks, I had worked with, and this was part of the population health thing. So if it's relevant, you can even put it in your cover letter just to touch on, and then you can highlight it in the interview. So yeah, I would say if you have room for it, it's a great way to add some extra skills that you may not even realize. I see some questions here that I see a question there said, does that apply for when people got laid off during COVID too? Like, should that be included? That's a great question. I wouldn't bring it up I feel like that would be the whole COVID, everything, like research stopped a large part of it, in terms of recruiting and everything. There was such a gap in everyone's CV and life and mental health, and things were online when they were just brand new. We wouldn't have been able to do this back then. And I wouldn't necessarily, unless it happens to be in the interview, that would be something you can discuss. But I wouldn't necessarily make a point of highlighting it. I think a lot of people had that shared experience. And so unless they ask about it, I wouldn't personally find that worthy that you'd have to disclose that up front. Is there any other?
I think we have another question from Joanne about how do you highlight or be on the lookout for corporate or industry when they use AI keywords to select candidates, and do you put those keywords in your CV?
Yeah, this is the kind of weird time period that we're in. And when I said that about like highlighting, this is it's that wordsmithing. So when you research the job, you find what they're looking for. And if you can find a way to incorporate that word of what they're looking for and that skill set, then you add it in there. You add other things in there too, but we are in this really weird time of AI in general.
I feel like both parties use AI. You know what I mean? It's like, well,
Yeah.
who did, like, what's going on?
Yeah. It's like who's calling who out
Right.
on using AI, right? And so you got to play the game, and that's part of being a researcher is you research how to play the game and you play it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of your superpowers. And what you bring to the table really is finding that out. But I honestly, lately, I've talked to a lot of people and they said that they've started highlighting. Some people even bold the words in their CV, which I thought that was a bit like, whoa, that's pretty obvious what you're doing here, trying to think. But they wanted to highlight. This is one of our regional managers in my department. I asked her, and she said, a few people, and she said, when I was scanning through the pile, it actually was helpful, even if she's not AI, but even her highlighting. So if you can, that's what I mean. Do your research. If you can find the words that are in their value statements, that are in their job description, in the skills required, and you can find a way to incorporate some, you're just trying to get through the door to get the interview. So yeah, it's a weird time that we're in, but I would advise that that's a good idea. I saw another
Thank
question.
you, Julie. Yes. Yes, there's one more from Mark, and he's asking if you could speak to applying for awards, scholarships, grants, and do you have any pointers on how to present information if we do not have all the required backgrounds, example, publications, etc.?
Yeah, that I fell into that category, and again, it's a struggle. So I mean, it's kind of broad because it really depends on the scholarship, depends on the grant, depends on the award. Applying for scholarships, sometimes it's about how you can sell, sometimes adding that personal story in there. It depends on the grant. If it's a, humanities related grant, or if it's a grant that's a foundation by a family that's donating money, sometimes I find adding a personal experience, your dedication to it, what motivates you to get in there. I've had success with awards by sharing my story, saying, I always am a full disclaimer. I was a mediocre undergrad. I watched soap operas in the student lounge for a good portion of my first couple of years. And I am upfront about that. But what I also add is like, hey, I found personal meaning. I needed to find meaning after I had cancer, and I needed to find a career that mattered to me. And I was working just jobs I didn't care about. So have used that before when I didn't have the background, but I'm not even going to lie. That's how I got into grad school, is because to get into my master's with mediocre marks, I sold them the story about my motivation and what made me want to be a better person and get a career that has meaning. And I use that as leverage. So it can work for you. It depends on the grant. It depends on the scholarship. But I find the common CV has now changed for a lot of grants, and I don't know if it's fully released, but they're now having more narrative based, which I find very interesting. That it's almost like they're looking for in grants, if you have I don't know if anyone's filled out the common CV, which is for grant applications. Oh, it's just a pain in the. I did that as a job for a long time for other people because no one wants to do it. So it's also a way to make some extra cash when you're doing grad school, is to offer to do these for people as a contract. But anyway, they're narrative based now. And so it's turning to selling the story, selling that, linking that, that's where that wording, that wordsmithing becomes so important of how do we, how do you, what does this mean? You can put all the technical skills you want, but how do you apply it? How is this relevant to what you want to do, what you're going to do, what your dream job is? And that's why I keep going back to that self-reflection exercise. What is your dream job? What steps do you need to take to get there? What motivates you to do this, the work that you do, and what motivates you to want to do it? What do you bring to the table personally and professionally? So it kind of all comes back to that. And I find that now grants are looking for more of that narrative to include. And that's when you can include on my grant applications. I have a big gap in publications. I have a gap when my mother passed away and I, took forever to finish my PhD. She was very ill through most of my PhD and I was caring for her. And so I have included that in some of my award applications to say, from that, I learned this, how did I build on that? That was my resilience. That was my, adaptability that didn't have funding. So I had to work 3 jobs. So this is how I got through grad school. So you can leverage a lot and it's very surprising. And again, those volunteer things, start volunteering for committees, start signing up to be a reviewer for journal articles. They often will allow grad students to do that. It's a great way to, get some experience. It may not be publications yourself, but it's, research services that you're providing, academic services. So yeah, Dina.
I had a previously submitted question from somebody that couldn't attend today.
Mm-hmm.
They're an international student and they don't have any work experience here. And so all the work experience was back from where they came from. And the question is that hold on, let me pull up the actual question. What he was trying to say is, how do you highlight those skills and transfer them to jobs here? Does that matter? There's different certificates that are required for I think it was a technologist. They were a technologist back in India. And so how do you translate that into here? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess it would be that same thing. I think the exact same principles apply, is that it's how you connect your background to the current opportunity. So no matter where that background was, if the experience is relevant and you find that there was something that was built from that experience or the skills gained from that, and it's up to that person to connect it. So, they may get questions in an interview where you can elaborate more, but it's about still selling, self-marketing, so that you can apply, you make it easy for them to see that connection. So instead of being worried, focusing on, oh, this might be a barrier, you need to sell them on why this is a strength. While having international experience in some contexts, that's relevant. Like, geez, you have international communication, experience that a lot of people in Canada might not have. You have knowledge of, a whole different health system or lab system or something, which you could bring to the table. So selling it as a strength, as opposed to, focusing on it potentially being a barrier. It's about how you wordsmith. So, okay, from this experience, I learned this, this, and this, and you're going to think about that. It's like, wow, here's how I have this that all your other candidates don't. And so it's really about shifting that. And again, going back to that self-reflection exercise. So even if you may be worried about it being a negative, it's up to you to find why that makes you relevant. Why do you think that you are the one for this job? That go back to thinking of yourself, well, geez, I'm really good at communicating, or I'm really good at, I worked in really stressful, poor working conditions. Yeah, you might not think that looks good, but what that tells me is resilience, adaptability, innovation, that you had to work around because you didn't have the resources, or you didn't have you had terrible supervision. I would never slander another workplace, but you can highlight some barriers to success and how you overcame them. So I think there's always a way to spin it, but it's up to you to spin it and not, don't allow them to see it as a negative. Preemptively, I guess, to say, if you can get to them
Yeah,
first to
absolutely.
say it's a strength, then they're not going to be able to poke a hole in it to say it's a negative.
Right. It's that
Yeah.
wordsmithing that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, you just,
sure.
you gotta,
Yeah.
you feel like you're selling yourself, which you are,
Yeah.
but you get good at it after a while if you apply for a million grants and jobs and yeah.
I think that's all for the questions in the chat, and I'm sure most of the people have trickled out. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no
and
problem. My
appreciate
pleasure.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Thank
again,
you.
feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give some feedback. I've had some great mentors along the way to help me with my CV and job application, so I'm happy to pay it forward.
Thanks
Yeah,
so
no,
much,
appreciate
Julie.
it.
And
Thank you.
again, on behalf
Great.
of the Impart and New Brunswick Heart Center, we really appreciate this. It was super helpful. And I just want to say again, really generous of you to offer people to schedule meetings with you or you reviewing their CVs. Thanks for staying a little bit later than anticipated.
Oh yeah, no problem. No, my pleasure. Thank you guys for hanging in there. Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.